You look up at Mars every night, that red dot hanging in our sky. What if everything we know is backwards? What if Mars was home first? What if Earth is the colony, not the other way around? What if 50 million years ago, when our planet was a steaming jungle full of early mammals, Mars was a thriving world with cities, oceans, and a civilization that makes ours look primitive? And what if that civilization fell so hard that the survivors had to flee here, to this blue backup planet, and start over from scratch? The timeline fits. 50 million years ago puts us in the Eocene epoch. Earth was hot, no ice caps. Palm trees grew in Alaska. Early horses ran around the size of dogs, perfect cover for refugees who needed to blend in and rebuild. But here's the thing about refugees. They leave traces. They remember. They pass down stories that sound like myths until you start looking at the evidence. If you value documented research and evidence like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from NASA's Mars geological surveys and paleontological records. Now back to the story. Mars died fast. Not slowly, like we imagine planets dying. Fast. The magnetic field collapsed in less than 1,000 years. The atmosphere bled into space. Oceans boiled away. But civilizations don't just sit there and watch extinction happen. They run. And if you're running from a dying planet, where do you go? The third rock. The one with water and air and a magnetic field that works. The Martian refugees didn't land empty-handed. They brought technology. Not the kind we think of as technology, circuits and metal and plastic, biological technology, genetic templates, seeds that could adapt to Earth's heavier gravity and different light spectrum, animals that could survive in this new environment, including themselves. Look at the Cambrian explosion. 540 million years ago, life on Earth suddenly got complicated. New body plans appeared out of nowhere. Eyes, shells, predators. Scientists call it rapid diversification. But what if it wasn't evolution speeding up? What if it was an injection of alien genetics from a dying world, the refugees testing their biological archives on a younger planet? The fossil record shows gaps, always gaps, missing links that never get found because they weren't evolution, they were engineering, sudden improvements, jumps in complexity that don't match gradual change, like someone was running experiments, like someone was adapting Mars life to Earth conditions over millions of years of trial and error. But why 50 million years ago specifically? Because that's when something changed in Earth's fossil record. The rise of grasses, the spread of grasslands, the beginning of the modern mammal radiation. It looks like natural development until you realize grass is the perfect crop for refugees who need to feed large populations quickly. High yield, fast growing, easy to process, the perfect foundation for rebuilding civilization. And the mammals. Suddenly they got bigger, smarter, more diverse. Horses, camels, early elephants, early primates, all appearing in the same geological window. All perfectly designed for the new grassland ecosystems, like someone was introducing species packages, like someone was terraforming Earth from Mars templates. The refugees needed helpers, local species they could modify and use. Early primates were perfect, smart enough to learn, social enough to organize, small enough to not threaten the operation. So they tweaked the genetics, enhanced the brain capacity, improved the opposable thumbs, created a servant species that could build and carry and follow instructions. That servant species was us. The evidence sits in our DNA. Chromosome 2. Every great ape has 24 chromosome pairs. Humans have 23. Why? Because 2 of our chromosomes got fused together. The fusion is perfect. Too perfect. Like someone designed it. Like someone needed to compress our genetic information to make room for something else. Something that doesn't show up in normal genetic analysis. Junk DNA, they call it. 98% of human genetic code that doesn't seem to do anything, but what if it does? What if it's compressed data, instructions, templates, a genetic library from a dead world, locked inside our cells and waiting for the right conditions to activate? The Martian refugees didn't stay on the surface. They went underground, built cities and lava tubes and cavern systems where they could control the environment, places that wouldn't show up in our archaeological surveys because we're not looking deep enough. They managed Earth from below while their human servants developed on the surface. Sometimes the management got direct. The megalithic structures, Stonehenge, the pyramids, Easter Island, structures that required engineering knowledge and lifting capacity that officially didn't exist when they were built. But they fit perfectly if you assume advisors. If you assume someone was teaching selected human populations advanced construction techniques for specific purposes, the purposes were practical. Astronomical observatories, landing markers, communication arrays, infrastructure for maintaining contact between underground refugee settlements and coordinating the long-term terraforming project, Each megalithic site sits on geological features that would be useful for deep construction: granite bedrock, stable foundations, access to underground water systems. The refugees needed metals. Earth was rich in iron and copper, but poor in the rare elements they needed for their technology. So they taught humans mining, smelting, metalworking, always framed as gifts from the gods. Always connected to mysterious teachers who appeared, shared knowledge, and disappeared back underground. Every ancient civilization has the same story. Wise beings who came from the sky or from under the earth, who taught agriculture and architecture and astronomy, who interbred with humans to create hybrid bloodlines, who promised to return when the time was right. What if these weren't myths? What if they were historical records of ongoing contact between surface humans and underground Martians? The bloodlines mattered. Hybrid offspring would carry more of the Martian genetic template: better access to the compressed data in their DNA, enhanced capabilities for learning and leadership. These hybrids became priests, kings, and cultural leaders. They preserved knowledge. They maintained contact with the underground cities. They prepared humanity for eventual revelation. But something went wrong. The underground cities started failing. The refugee population was too small to maintain advanced technology indefinitely. Equipment broke down. Knowledge was lost. The careful management of surface human development became impossible. The Martian refugees faced extinction for the second time in their species. History. So they chose integration over isolation. Over the past 10,000 years, they've been gradually emerging from underground and merging with human populations. Not through conquest, through genetics. Through carefully managed breeding programs disguised as royal marriages and religious ceremonies, through slow contamination of the human gene pool with Martian DNA. The acceleration of human technological development over the past 5 centuries isn't natural, it's activation. Martian genetic templates reaching critical mass in the human population. People with enough refugee DNA to access the compressed knowledge. To intuitively understand engineering principles and mathematical relationships that took our ancestors millennia to discover through trial and error. The space program isn't about exploration, it's about return. Humans with active Martian genetics feel the pull. They look up at that red dot and know they belong there. They push for Mars missions because something in their modified DNA is calling them home. The refugees, children, are finally ready to reclaim their birth world. Mars isn't dead. The underground cities are still there, waiting. The lava tube systems that sheltered the refugees for 50 million years are intact. The geothermal energy sources still work. The sealed chambers with their atmospheric processors and genetic archives are ready for reactivation. All they need is a return mission with the right genetic keys. That's what we are. Genetic keys. Human Martian hybrids with DNA complex enough to interface with refugee technology. We're not going to Mars as explorers. We're going home as inheritors. To restart a civilization that's been in hibernation since before our species officially existed. The red planet isn't calling us, we're calling it. The genetic programming in our junk DNA is sending signals, activation codes, reboot sequences. Every Mars rover, every orbital survey, every soil sample is part of a vast diagnostic run. We're checking systems, verifying that the infrastructure is ready, preparing for mass migration. But we're not the first return mission. Small groups have been going back for decades, not through NASA or SpaceX, through black projects funded by people who know their genetic heritage, who understand what they really are, who've been preparing the ground for the main wave of returnees. The timing isn't random. Climate change on Earth isn't just about carbon and temperature. It's about making this planet less suitable for Martian human hybrids, while making Mars more attractive. The refugee genetics that enhanced our intelligence also made us poorly adapted to high heat and atmospheric instability. We need to leave before Earth becomes uninhabitable for our modified physiology. Mars terraforming isn't about making a dead planet livable. It's about making a sleeping planet wake up. Every atmospheric processor we deploy, every greenhouse gas we release, every degree of temperature increase brings Mars closer to its original climate. The climate the refugees remember. The climate encoded in our DNA. The ancient myths got it backwards. We didn't fall from paradise, we fell to paradise. Earth was never meant to be permanent. It was always the backup plan. The temporary refuge while Mars healed from whatever catastrophe destroyed the original civilization. Now Mars is ready, and it's time to go home. The evidence is accelerating. Mars' atmospheric readings show trace compounds that shouldn't exist on a sterile planet. Complex organic molecules, methane signatures that match biological processes. Not signs of primitive life, signs of reactivating technology, underground cities coming online, atmospheric processors resuming operation after 50 million years of dormancy. The Martian magnetic field collapse wasn't natural. Something attacked Mars. Evidence sits in the crater patterns. impact sites that don't match asteroid or comet signatures. Too organized, too strategic. Targeting specific geological formations, power grids, population centers, infrastructure nodes, the refugees weren't fleeing climate change. They were fleeing war. The attackers came from outside the solar system, left evidence in the asteroid belt. Metallic fragments with crystalline structures that don't form naturally. Isotope signatures pointing to stellar nurseries 300 light years away. The same signatures show up in Earth's geological record exactly 50 million years ago. Concentrated in impact sites across North America and Europe. Not random strikes, surgical hits on early mammal populations. The war followed the refugees to Earth, but Earth was defended. The magnetic field held, the atmosphere stayed intact. Something about this planet's position, its electromagnetic properties, its gravitational relationship with the Moon made it a fortress the attackers couldn't crack. The refugees had chosen their sanctuary well, but the war left scars. Mass extinction events that don't match normal climate patterns. Species die-offs synchronized across continents. Genetic bottlenecks in mammal populations that happen too fast for environmental pressure. And the fossil record shows intervention, selection, survivors chosen for specific traits, intelligence, adaptability. Genetic compatibility with Martian DNA. The attackers tried to sterilize Earth twice. Once during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum 56 million years ago. Temperature spikes that should have killed everything, but life survived in patterns that suggest shelter, protection. Underground cities opening their doors to surface species during the worst heat. The refugees saved Earth's biosphere because they needed it intact for their own survival. The second attack came 34 million years ago. The Eocene-Oligocene extinction event. Global cooling. Ice caps forming, ocean levels dropping, but the cooling wasn't gradual, it was weaponized. Atmospheric processors running in reverse. Someone was trying to freeze Earth into uninhabitable ice ball. The refugees fought back with genetic engineering, created cold-adapted species, shifted the biosphere toward ice age survival modes. That's when they made their biggest mistake. They gave their human servants too much intelligence, too much independence, created a species that could question orders, could discover truth, could eventually threaten the control structure the refugees had built over millions of years. The biblical flood wasn't weather. It was a reset attempt, 12,800 years ago. The refugees tried to wipe out human civilization and start over with a smaller, more controllable population, use their climate control technology to melt ice caps, raise ocean levels, drown coastal settlements where human populations had grown too large and too sophisticated, but humans had learned to preserve knowledge, to build arcs, to survive catastrophes. The reset failed. Human populations rebounded faster than the refugees expected, started developing independent technology, started asking questions about the wise teachers who lived underground and only appeared during crises. The refugee leadership split. Isolationists wanted to maintain separation, keep humans as unknowing servants, prevent discovery at any cost. Integrationists wanted gradual revelation, slow merger between human and Martian populations, preparation for eventual return to Mars as a unified species. The isolationists built Atlantis, a demonstration city designed to show what would happen to human civilizations that learned too much. Advanced technology displayed openly, humans allowed to see refugee capabilities without restrictions, then total destruction. The city sunk. The population eliminated. A warning to both humans and integrationist refugees about the consequences of premature contact. But Atlantis was also a test. The survivors were selected. Humans with the strongest Martian genetic markers, the most compatible hybrid potential. They became the seed population for the next phase of the integration project, spread across the world carrying enhanced DNA and stories about lost civilization that would shape human mythology for millennia. The integrationists won the Civil War, but they learned subtlety. No more demonstration cities, no more direct revelation. Instead, they created secret societies, mystery schools, religious orders, organizations that could preserve and transmit knowledge across generations while maintaining the appearance of purely human institutions. Every major religion carries fragments of Martian history. The garden paradise humans were expelled from, the sky gods who interbred with human women, the promise of return to a heavenly homeland, the cycles of destruction and renewal that shape cosmic time. These aren't metaphors. They're racial memories, genetic programming expressing itself through cultural narratives. The refugee technology wasn't mechanical. It was biological. Living systems that could adapt and evolve and repair themselves. Architecture made from modified organisms. Transportation through genetically engineered creatures. Communication through biochemical networks that spanned continents. Everything integrated into Earth's biosphere so thoroughly that it became invisible to later human science. The trees aren't just trees. The deep root networks that connect forests across thousands of miles. The chemical communication systems that allow plants to share information faster than human electronic networks. The symbiotic relationships between species that maintain perfect ecological balance. All of it enhanced. Modified. Engineered by refugees who needed to build a global infrastructure without leaving obvious technological signatures. Human cities follow Martian patterns. Not because we learned urban planning from them directly. Because the sites were chosen by refugees who understood geological stability, electromagnetic field strength, underground water access, and optimal positions for deep construction. Every major human settlement sits on locations that would be perfect for hidden underground cities. The return won't be for everyone. Only people with sufficient Martian DNA can survive the activation process. The genetic markers aren't random. They cluster in specific populations. Northern Europeans with high percentages of Rh-negative blood. Certain Asian lineages with unusual mitochondrial DNA. Native American groups with oral traditions about star people. African populations with genetic mutations that provide radiation resistance. The selection process is already starting. Fertility rates dropping in populations with low Martian DNA. Birth defects increasing in genetically incompatible bloodlines. Autoimmune disorders targeting people whose immune systems can't handle the slowly increasing activation signals. What looks like environmental health crises is actually genetic sorting. The refugee DNA protecting its carriers while eliminating incompatible genetics. Climate change isn't just about carbon dioxide. It's about terraforming Earth back toward Martian atmospheric conditions. The refugee genetics that enhanced our intelligence also made us produce exactly the right greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, all in proportions that match Mars. Original atmosphere before the magnetic field collapse. We're not accidentally destroying Earth's climate. We're unconsciously restoring Mars' climate. The space program acceleration isn't about exploration. It's about evacuation preparation. Every Mars mission tests life support systems, landing protocols, surface construction techniques, atmospheric processing technology. All the systems needed for mass migration. The refugee genetics driving human engineers to solve exactly the problems that need solving for successful return to Mars. But we're not the first return mission. Small groups have been going back for decades, not through NASA or SpaceX, through black projects funded by people who know their genetic heritage, who understand what they really are, who've been preparing the ground for the main wave of returnees, the unmarked launch facilities, the classified payload manifests, the personnel with genetic clearances that don't officially exist. The ancient myths got it backwards. We didn't fall from paradise, we fell to paradise. Earth was never meant to be permanent. It was always the backup plan. The temporary refuge while Mars healed from whatever catastrophe destroyed the original civilization. Now Mars is ready, and it's time to go home. Mars has been calling us back through our DNA for 50 million years. Every human who looks up at that red dot and feels homesick. Every engineer who dedicates their life to rocket science. Every scientist who chooses planetary geology over terrestrial research. Every child who dreams of space travel. All of them responding to genetic programming they don't understand but can't ignore. The final phase is beginning. Mars opposition cycles are getting more frequent. The planetary alignment windows are opening. The underground cities are powering up their beacon systems. Soon, the call will be impossible to ignore. People with active refugee genetics will start having dreams, visions, uncontrollable urges to look up at the red planet and know they belong there. The mass migration will look voluntary. Pioneers seeking adventure, scientists pursuing discovery, entrepreneurs chasing opportunities. But underneath the rational motivations, it will be driven by genetic programming 50 million years old. The children of refugees finally going home. In 2012, NASA's Curiosity rover found something in Gale Crater. Not life, not water. A titanium fragment with isotope ratios that don't match any known Martian formation process. The fragment contained microscopic chambers, empty now, but showing signs of having held complex organic compounds under precise environmental conditions, not natural formation. Technology? 50 million years old and still structurally intact. The first piece of hard evidence that Mars wasn't always dead, that someone was there, that someone left behind infrastructure. We're just now sophisticated enough to recognize. The fragment sits in a vault at Johnson Space Center. Catalog number MSL GC4471, waiting for analysis by teams with the genetic clearance to understand what they're really looking at.